Hey there, YouTube. I'm going to be deploying a Dokku server today. I've been doing the West Boss course, Advanced React and GraphQL course. It's been super great. I love it. I love GraphQL, but I wanted to figure out how to deploy my own Prisma server instead of kind of piggybacking off of their free servers. And I thought an easy way to do that would be Dokku, something I've played around with but I don't really know very much about. So after kind of running through it a couple of times, I thought I'd make a video kind of going through the whole process because there were definitely some tricky bits along the way. Just because you have a Prisma server, you've got a Yoga server, and you've got your front end all needing to be deployed. And Dokku is really cool because you can deploy them all into the same environment, but it does lead to a couple of tricky little steps. So the very first thing was I had to put my domain name servers in there for DigitalOcean. I am using DigitalOcean here, but I'm sure you could do the same thing with Linode, or you could probably get some virtual server on, well, there's plenty of other places. I love DigitalOcean, and I'll actually put a link to a little referral thing below. And if you use DigitalOcean also, then it helps me because I'm super poor. But you just need to put in the name servers for your domain. They're ns1, ns2, and ns3.digitalocean.com. Once you've done that, we're going to go right over to DigitalOcean and create the droplet. So I'm going to go in here, create a new droplet, and I'm going to go down to, is it Marketplace? And Dokku is right here about halfway down. Dokku version 0.12.13 on Ubuntu 18.4. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we'll go down. I do want a starter plan, but I don't want a $40 a month one. I want a $10 a month one. I think you could probably use the $5 a month one, but it might be just a little bit too small. But I'm not totally sure. You can kind of experiment around with that. But it only charges you by the hour. So it's really nothing you can't experiment with. So I'm going to keep scrolling down. I'm going to use the Singapore server and keep scrolling down, and I'm going to put my desktop SSH key in there. If you don't know how to set up an SSH key, it really makes things a lot easier. Feel free to click on the little question mark, or DigitalOcean has some tutorials with how to. And then last but not least, I'm going to give it I'm just going to call my droplet the same thing that I'll be calling that my domain name is. I bought shunyi.today. Shunyi is the little area of Beijing where I live. Just a little goofy domain I bought. And we're going to just create it right on in there. So you got to watch the droplet spin itself to life here, and then we can go ahead and put some networking tricks on there. Actually, I can probably go ahead and start adding that networking in. I'll go ahead and I'm going to delete this one, and we'll just do it from scratch. When you put shunyi.today in here, you can add the domain. And that is great. We're going to use the @ symbol. That is your host name. It's just kind of a placeholder for your host name. And we're going to direct to this shunyi.today droplet that I created in Singapore, SGP1. And it's got a IP address that we may need to use later. We'll see. But I'm going to create this record. And then for Dokku, because we're going to use virtual naming, I want to give it this asterisk, and also direct that to shunyi.today. Because of the virtual naming in Dokku, we want the subdomains. We want subdomains to be the names of the containers that we create in there, and so we've got to give it this asterisk. And I believe that will work for what we want. So I think we've got our droplet all set up here. Yep, it spun itself to life. That's great. And I don't know how long it'll take for networking to propagate, but all right, we're at our shunyi.today, brand new droplet in here. The first thing will be this blurry part that I've blurred out here. It's going to be your SSH key that you have set up. If you didn't create one there, you also have the opportunity to do that now. And I'm going to make sure my host name is actually shunyi.today. And I'm going to tick the use virtual naming for apps. So that means the container name is just going to get replaced in here as a subdomain of shunyi.today. Which is really helpful because we've got a Prisma server and then a yoga server to go into this one super cool thing. All right, so once you hit setup there, it takes you to some documentation to finish deploying stuff there. But I'm actually going to flip over to the Prisma documentation, and that is pretty easily found at prisma.io. But what we need to do is actually SSH into our shunyi. Okay, there we go. I'm into my Dokku server. You can get a list of Dokku commands by just typing Dokku, and then I think, for example, you've got apps and you can type help to get even more specific help as to what you're doing. I actually want to install a couple of plugins here. The first one is going to be Postgres, and we can sudo Dokku plugin install https github.com Dokku, and we want Dokku-postgres.git. So that'll take a second. It'll spin up a little plugin for creating Postgres SQL servers. SQL? What's the verdict on how that is pronounced? Just gonna think to myself as we address Postgres, and there we go. Now we need to actually install one other plugin, and that's gonna be the Let's Encrypt plugin, and that'll allow us to provision some SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt, free way of getting a HTTPS domain. So the very first thing I'm going to do is then we're going to create the SQL database. So we're going to create Dokku Postgres, and actually here, if I just run Dokku again, I can actually see these community plugins down here, and you can get help for those. So let's go Dokku Postgres, and we're going to say create, and we're going to call it Prisma DB. And we're going to go Dokku apps create, and we're going to just write Prisma. And that will create the Prisma container. Now we got to link them together. And we do that. Oh, I almost forgot one very important little detail here. We need this DSN information here. So I'm just going to copy this. I have a little notepad open on my other monitor. I'm just going to paste that there because we're going to use some of that information here in a little bit. So now to link them together, we've got a Dokku Postgres link, and we're going to write Prisma DB, and we're linking that to Prisma, the Prisma container that we've created. And no Prisma has not been deployed. That is fine, because because that's the very next thing we're going to do. So I'm going to log out back on my local machine. I've got to create a couple of files here. So let's get out of here, and we're going to go see projects, apps, show me today project. And here I've got my back end, my front end, and this Prisma folder. Let's go into Prisma, and I don't know what GraphQL is, so I'm going to remove it. And let's open this in VS Code, because we got to make a few changes here. The Dockerfile, yeah, this works. Okay, so we need, actually, we don't need either of these. I don't know why those are still in there. Move to trash. Okay, let's create a new file called Dockerfile. And we've got to put some boilerplate in here. I'm going to copy and paste right from the docs. Again, those will also be in the description of the video, or in my blog post. I will have links to the actual documentation. But you'll see here it's going to spin up the Prisma server, and then give it some link to a YAML file, which we're going to put in config.yml. And that is also boilerplate. I'm copying over from the docs, but we've got to replace a couple of things here. There was that little DSN link that we had. You're going to take the password out of there, and we're going to replace that in here. And then the host name is everything to the right of the @ symbol. It should just be Dokku, Postgres, and then whatever you named your, whatever you named the database itself. And I did Prisma-DB. And I think that will give us what we need to spin up that Prisma server. To deploy it, we've got to actually initially commit this and then push it up to Dokku. So let me go back over to my command line, and let's git init and git add everything, git commit add, initial commit, and then we can git remote add Dokku at shunyi.today, and called it Prisma. So that's going to be our remote repository. We can git push set upstream Dokku master. And we'll get to see all of the Dokku magic happening here. It's going to build Prisma from the Dockerfile. If you cross your fingers and have happy thoughts, nothing will go wrong. Okay, and we're done. We've spun up a Prisma server here. Now, I'm using this HTTP. I do want to SSL encrypt everything. I've found that if you don't get a certificate on your domain, sometimes you run into these unsecure origin errors that really can be super annoying to debug when you're not a like super hardcore DevOps guy like myself. I'm not really, my Linux knowledge is quite basic, but let's go ahead and we're going to SSH back into our Dokku server, and we are going to go ahead and provision that certificate. Now I think we've got to set a default email, and what we can do is Dokku set config, no, let's do Dokku config, let's do help, because I think it's we wanted to do a global variable. Yes, okay. It'll be Dokku config set set global, and the The actual global variable we're going to set here is set global Dokku let's encrypt email. And we're just going to give it our email address, jordan@jordanray.com. So let's go ahead and set that variable. And then we can Dokku let's encrypt Prisma. And that'll spin up some certificates there for our Prisma server. While that is, well, no, I might as well let it finish because we need to then go over to our Prisma console and we need to add a server. I'm going to actually create a totally new workspace for this. I'm going to call it Shunyi Today. Shunyi Today is a good slug, that's fine. Workspace created, though I don't see it. Maybe I have to refresh. If I refresh the console, let's see. Now I've got it. Okay, interesting. I'm going to go over to servers, and it's got those demo servers in here. Let's see if we're done. We're done provisioning the server. Let's try to add it now. It has to be lowercase n sluggable. I'll just call it Prisma. I'll call it Dokku Prisma. And we're going to connect to a server. Okay, before I put in this endpoint, I want to get Let's Encrypt going on the playground itself. What we've got to do first is you need to Dokku proxy port add. We're adding it to Prisma, and we want HTTP and incoming on 4466 to go to port 80. And for HTTPS, we want 4466 to go to 443. And those set up the defaults. Error page, what is that telling me? Let's look at Dokku proxy reports Prisma. Dokku proxy help. And Dokku proxy report, not reports, Prisma. I think I've got to remove some of these. I want to Dokku proxy ports remove from Prisma. I want to remove HTTP 4466 4466. And then let's remove that HTTPS. Maybe I have to actually have maybe I already have to have the SSL cert. See, we're learning on the job here. Let's make sure that this is working. Yeah, okay, so I'm loading the Prisma at prisma.shunyi.today. That's fine. Let me add Dokku let's encrypt Prisma. And all right, magic is happening. Oh, so it added the port mapping right in here. So that's perfect. All right, it did that for us. All right, it looks like we are good to go there. If I refresh this, does it give me HTTPS? It does. Beautiful. However, if we look at the developer logs here, we don't have a project associated with this. So this is where we've got to HTTPS. Let's go to prisma.shunyi.today. And then the API secret is what we want. It should be whatever you set your API secret. Let's log out of there. I'm going to go back a directory into my backend. And I'm going to look at my variables.env, and let's look at I want my Prisma secret. I'm just going to copy this here. Paste it on in. Let's connect to the server. With any luck, we should have a Prisma server that we can build our service onto. Okay, Dokku Prisma, region, self-hosted, healthy, okay. We'll see about that. I'm going to go back over to my terminal. I'm going to run yarn deploy, and I'm going to pass the n parameter for new. And hopefully this will give us the option to select that server. Perfect. Let's go ahead and just call it backend, and I'm going to call it production. And it's going to write the endpoint. It's going to do some wizardry, more magic, taking that schema, putting it out there into the cloud, and give us our Prisma service. Okay, and its endpoint is here. I'm going to refresh this. Now I think I'm going to have to make a change. If I go into my back end and copy the endpoint, I don't have there's nothing in my database, obviously. But I'm going to copy this endpoint from the bottom left here. And I'll go back into my, see, so it added this endpoint here for us. But I'm going to delete those. And I'm going to uncomment this. And let's go into variables. I want to have this endpoint here. And we're looking okay. And I think we can now go and deploy our yoga server. Sorry, typing and talking don't seem to be my strong suit at the end of the day. So I need to actually Dokku apps create, and let's call it yoga, not yogo, yoga. And let's, I wonder if we can, I think I need to deploy it first before I give it an SSL cert. Might as well try it. Let's go back into backend directory and let's deploy this server. I think I might need to get remote remove Dokku. I don't know if I'd added that before when I was testing, but we're going to add Dokku at shunyi.today, and we're going to call it yoga. And then I want to git push Dokku. Oh, I can set upstream Dokku master. And this will take a second. Okay, application deployed to yoga.shunyi.today. Now we got to go in and put some configuration variables in there, and then let's encrypt it for SSL. So once we're back into our Dokku server, we can config set, and we want to set yoga. And now we're going to go ahead and put in all of our front end URL. And I'm going to make this HTTPS shunyi.today. All right, perfect. So if we have any luck at all, we can go to yoga.shunyi.today. and we will have our GraphQL playground. And we should see our schema in here. Oh, beautiful, beautiful schema. And if we run a query, let's do a query on users, because it should tell us that we're not logged in. You must be logged in. Perfect. But if we run something on stores, just get the ID. Yes, we get an empty array because we got nothing in our database. However, we know that this thing is running yoga.shunyi.today. Perfect. Okay, we got one more step. We need to put the front end in there. And we can do that. Let's make sure we grab this URL. And let's go over to, let's actually create the container in here. And we will just do Dokku apps create, and we're going to call it shunyi.today. Perfect. It is now created. Let's log out. Let's go back into our front end directory, and we need to make a change in here. And we're going to change in our config. We want the production endpoint to be that yoga server. I don't think I want that last. Okay, once we've added our production endpoint, we've got to create an app.json, and this is basically to tell it to do the Heroku build, but it's just the Dokku version of that. I don't know how different it is. I've used Heroku a few times, and I know that they have an app.json that you can use to pass in some configuration stuff, but I can't quite remember all the settings. But it's something similar. So we're going to do a pre-deploy, and we're going to yarn build. I'm using yarn. You can use npm run. It doesn't matter. Just whatever you have, whatever you're more comfortable using. And the last thing we're going to do is create a file called procfile, just procfile.nothing, and we're going to tell it to web yarn start port and then $port, and this will grab the port that the container gives us. And we're going to save that. Let's go back over. Let's commit things. Commit and Dokku files created, and let's get remote. Do I have it? Yeah. Get remote add Dokku. Yep. Dokku at shunyi.today. Shunyi today is the name of the container. Now I want to get push Dokku master. And let that magic work. Okay, it has finished. I'm not even going to test it until I go into my Dokku container one last time. I'm going to Dokku, let's encrypt, and we're going to encrypt our shunyi.today. Let's see. Okay, it doesn't seem to be any problems. The moment of truth. Can leave the playground here and go to shunyi.today. And there is our website. Valid API. Oh yeah, I'm using Mapbox in this, and I haven't put that in here yet, but we can click around. Our Next.js app is running. It doesn't have any data in there. You know, still very similar to the original project, but the main thing is that we've got all of our application running on a Dokku container. I've really got to do some more testing with performance, see how well it really performs, but I hope that helps somebody. I know it's a little bit long, tedious, but hopefully it helps you prevent at least a few of the errors that I went through as I was trying to set it up. Cheers and good luck.